The Clippers blow a 3-1 lead to the Denver Nuggets in the Western Conference. We'll talk about that. Texas football is back, and they are coincidentally 1-0, big 59-3 win over the UTEP Miners. And the NFL is back. You can see Goskowski having some trouble there. We have the picks for you. This is the 1-0 Sports Show.
Texas finally 1-0, finally riding for the brand, although Tom Herman did say they were 1-0 10 times last season.
Feinbaum, I'll give him like half a point.
Dude, you like okay. Feinbaum way too much.
Yeah, all right. I'm like
you're
the Feinbaum of this show.
By the way, that looks Ohio State. Is that an omen? Give me that Longhorn hat.
Oh man!
Hook him, baby.
All right, he's pulling the Corso.
Welcome to the 1-0 Sports Show. Happy Friday morning to you. I'm your host this morning, Robert Trevino, and we have some great analysts on, Henry Corwin and Jake Herman. How does it feel to be on, guys?
Feels great, Robert. You know, I missed the show. It was upsetting, you know, after the whole virus last year that we weren't really able to continue it as much. But it's great to be back.
Absolutely, Jake.
Yeah, great way to spend a Friday morning. Love getting to talk some sports with you guys and ready to get into it.
All right, well, let's get right into it, as you said, with who's hot and who's not of the week. Henry, let's start with you. Who's hot?
Sure. For who is hot, I got the Los Angeles Dodgers. They just were the first team in the MLB to clinch a playoff. Obviously, they have had a lot of success the past few seasons in the regular season. The same has not transferred over into the playoffs, and I think the same will continue. I think I am looking forward to them not succeeding in the playoffs, but as of now, they are hot, so I'll give it to them.
All right, that is a good pick. Now let's stick with you, Henry. Who's not hot?
Who's not? Man, I got Doc Rivers. He is now
and it's down to 6 with 7 minutes remaining.
Leads in his career. Listen, before this series, there were some whispers, just whispers, about maybe is Doc Rivers a little bit overrated as a coach.
9 from the field.
You're going to start to hear that narrative being pushed a little more now. I mean,
from way downtown.
He won one ring in Boston. Some people might even argue he underperformed with that big three with only one ring. Things been with the Clippers, obviously the 2-3-1 leads he's blown with the Clippers. Not able to get that team, not even to the finals. Can't even get them to the Western Conference Finals. So Doc Rivers is not hot right now.
I will agree with that. 3-3-1 leads kind of leads you to question a little bit of Doc Rivers' postseason resume there. Let's go to Jake now. Who's hot?
Who's hot? I've got the Dallas Stars, Robert. Out of the Western Conference, they have advanced and are now heading into the Stanley Cup. And this is a team that's peaking at the right time. They had a real up and down season, had to let their coach go in the middle of a winning streak because of some off-the-ice issues. But now everybody on the roster is contributing. Nobody wants to face this Dallas Stars team. Guys like Joel Kiviranta, Denis Gurianov are scoring goals at will. Watch out for the Dallas Stars. Sort of an underdog story to the Stanley Cup final.
Absolutely. Great positivity there. Let's get some negativity from you. Who's not?
Yeah, there's not a lot going right at this moment for the Cleveland Indians, Robert. This is a team that looked to be a shoo-in for the postseason, but it was a comedy of errors last night against the Chicago Cubs, a game that the Indians lost. This would be their 8th loss in a row. As you can see, the 2 errors on a single play put the Cubs up 5-3. Indians come back, tie the game up at 5, but it ends in unceremonious fashion, a hit by pitch with the bases loaded, and the Cleveland Indians are now 26-23, clinging on to that last AL wildcard spot by only a handful of games. This team falling a little short of expectations at this point of the season.
Yeah, well, let's see if they can hold on. Now let's go into a new segment. This is called I'm Taking My Ball and Going Home, presented by No One. So the Big Ten and the Pac-12, after dropping out, it looked like, of this college football season, now it looks like they want back in. After seeing the other 3 conferences start their seasons, it appears as though the Big Ten kind of missing out. Ohio State, Michigan, 2 teams you thought could go all the way in the college football playoff, decided not to play this year. So let's get both of your takes on this. Do you think either conference should be able to get a team in the college football playoff? And kind of, do you think they're jealous of the other conferences?
I do. I think the Big Ten sort of walked back their decision because they saw what the other conferences were doing. I think it was a decision that was not only based off of what the other conferences were able to do and the protocols they were going to put in place, but because of the playoffs, like you were mentioning. Ohio State is one of the top 4 teams in the country by most people's rankings going into the season, and I think they do have a chance to go to the playoff if they play any kind of a legitimate season. You know, the Big 12 commissioner, Bob Bowlesby, came out and said, yeah, if they play an 8-game schedule, they deserve to be in the selection committee's eyes, just like all these other teams.
Henry, do you agree with that sentiment that they deserve to be in the college football playoff should they come back?
Yeah, you know, as much as I would love to embrace debate here and, you know, have Jake and I go at it, I'm going to have to agree with him. I mean, it's only been 1 week so far of like seasons with the Big 12 and some other conferences. Had they pushed this back a little bit longer, maybe then you can have a conversation that they don't deserve to be in, because then you get into the whole situation of, are they going to push the college football playoff back until February or something? And then you're going to have teams like in the Big 12 that have 3 months off, 2 months off before they play games. So I do think that they do. These teams can get into the college football playoff. I have no problem with that. And I'm also honestly not too surprised that the Big Ten has decided to now get back into the season and the Pac-12 wants to. I figured as soon as, you know, Big 12 and a couple other conferences decided to, these teams are just going to follow suit. So it's kind of like a follow the leader game here, and Big 10 and Pac-12 seem to be trying to follow the other leaders.
Yeah, I do agree with both of your sentiments that if the other conferences aren't really playing those non-conference games, if they're able to get back and play a similar amount of games, they should get a fair shot. So, you know what? I'm sorry to y'all guys, but let's not embrace debate on this topic. We'll get into it on the next block for sure, because we're going to be talking about Texas football winning 59-3 over UTEP. They looked especially dominant. So be sure to stick around. After this, you're watching the One and O Sports Show. Welcome back to the One and O Sports Show, the premier sports morning talk show on the 40 acres. And let's get to talking about football on the 40 acres, with Texas football being back last week in Austin with a 59-3 win over UTEP. They looked great. Sam Ehlinger threw for a bunch of touchdowns, broke a bunch of school records. Let's analyze this game and what it can tell us going forward for the Longhorns football season. And let's talk about the significance of this Week 1 win. Jake, let's start with you. What was the significance of this dominant win that Texas had over UTEP?
Yeah, Robert, a dominant win. I don't really see it as too significant, but I definitely see it as promising. The offense looked to be in sync. You know, a couple of questions were answered about whether Sam Ehlinger would be on the same page with his receivers, with so many new faces in that wide receiver room. That box, for me, got checked. The defense looked fast. They looked disciplined. I think they tackled well, and that's something that Chris Ash was planning on drilling into this team. That box looked to be checked. But again, all of this is against UTEP, who is one of the worst teams in the FBS. So you just need to build on this win and take all the positives you can without reading too much into it.
Yeah, Henry, Jake said not really significant. Do you agree with that take, or are you kind of opposed?
Jake, let me tell you something. This win is significant for one reason and one reason only. Because Texas did not play down to their competition, which is something they have consistently done over the past few years. I'm talking about winning by 1 touchdown at home versus Tulsa. You know, I'm talking about losing to Maryland in 2 openers. Texas has a bad habit of doing that under Coach Herman. And the fact that they did not do that this week, they covered the spread and then some. That, to me, was the most impressive thing about this game. Obviously, the competition was not, you know, the level that we are going to see for the rest of the season. But the fact that they came out with no mercy, ready to win, and they took care of business and then some, I think that makes it significant.
Yeah, Henry, I think Texas played down to their competition a couple of years ago against Maryland and even last year against teams like Iowa State, because Texas was a bad football team in those years. I don't think there's any way that this Texas team could have played down to the level of UTEP. But, yeah, I agree with all the things you said and agree that they look very good.
All right, well, I'm glad you guys found a consensus because it looked like you were going to get into it a little bit there. Well, let's see if this next question doesn't bring you guys into that type of argument. Sam Ehlinger, of course, I mentioned it when I introed it. Sam Ehlinger had a great day, set some school records, I believe, for passing yards in the first half, had 5 touchdowns, ended up being pulled in the third quarter, which as a starting quarterback for a major Division I college football team, that's pretty much your only goal is to get pulled out in the third quarter of every game. Is Sam Ehlinger a legitimate Heisman contender? Henry, let's start with you.
Is he a contender? Sure, he's a contender. I don't think he's going to get the Heisman. I think there are just kind of too many things that could play against him. I know Jake's going to talk about this in a little bit, but obviously the Texas team is focusing a little more on their run game this season. The weapons are not as great as they used to be. That can help him because if he can perform great with less weapons in the receiving core, he could make a run for contention. But I just think the combination of the personnel Texas has and the fact that seems like sometimes what can go wrong will go wrong with Texas. So I don't think he's going to win the Heisman. But is he a contender? Sure. I'll say he's a contender.
All right, I'll revise the question for you, Jake, then, because I believe you would mostly agree that he's a contender, no? So let's say, do you believe he's going to win the Heisman? Do you see him as one of those favorites?
I don't. I don't believe that Sam Ehlinger will win the Heisman Trophy this year. And it really is for the reasons that Henry mentioned. I mean, yes, Sam checks the boxes as a contender for the Heisman Trophy. He puts up big numbers. He plays for a Power 5 team that is going to be in the national conversation on national television. I just don't think that he'll be able to put up the kind of numbers that he did last season, A, because the receivers are not going to be as dominant, not going to be as much of a sure thing. He had 2 NFL guys last year he was throwing to, Devin Duvernay, Colin Johnson. And B, because I think Texas is going to impose their will with the running game more so this year, and Sam will not be the only reason that Texas is in the national spotlight. A little bit of a Jalen Hurts syndrome where the rest of the team's strength can sort of hurt one's Heisman candidacy. That's how I see it going for Ehlinger this year in terms of the Heisman race.
I would disagree a little bit with both of you. I just don't see another player, like you said, with Jalen Hurts that could take away from Ehlinger. But let's get into the next question. B.J. Foster, a little bit of drama on the field for the Longhorns, sophomore. Part of that established secondary that Texas has left the field in the middle of the third quarter, and now it seems that Herman has welcomed him back with open arms, and he's back on the team. So let's kind of play coach a little bit with both of you guys. Would you let, if you were Tom Herman, B.J. Foster come back on the team and play this season? Jake, we'll start with you.
Well, as Coach Herman, not necessarily Coach Herman, but Coach Herman, I would let B.J. Foster rejoin the team if his teammates think that he deserves another shot. Look, I mean, B.J. Foster is a guy who, even on the field, regardless of what happens off the field, he plays sort of on a knife's edge. He's a big hitter. He makes high-risk, high-reward plays. Sometimes he gets burned. And now we know that it kind of oozes into his personality even off the field. He had an incident over the summer where he broke his hand out of anger. And now, this happens where he quits the team at halftime. It's just the kind of player that he is. And it's something that he hasn't been able to sort of turn off the field. But I think if the teammates in that locker room and, the kind of impact that he has, if those circumstances would allow him to come back, I don't see any reason why he can't get one more chance.
Yeah, Henry. So one Herman seems to agree with his counterpart, Herman. What say you?
Well, I'm going to agree with Jake's point about how B.J. Foster can be, I guess, a little iffy, I would say. But if we're just talking about this specific incident, him leaving the team in the third quarter, should he be allowed to play this again this season? My answer is going to be yes, he should. I mean, I know it's cliche, like everyone makes mistakes, this, that, the other. But if Herman is going to welcome him back, and if he is as apologetic as he says he is, nobody's perfect, I do think he should be allowed to play again. However, having said that, that doesn't mean his playing time is going to get any better. I mean, if he's upset about his playing time now, it should be the same next week that Herman planned before this incident. And if he's still going to be upset about that and continue to have these kind of episodes, then maybe that's going to be a bigger problem. But you can come back on the team, but your playing time is going to be the same that it was before.
Yeah, so a little bit of leniency from both of you guys there. I agree personally. I do think, you give him another chance here. So let's get to the ultimate question. We talked about it. We alluded to it with the first question saying, What does this spell out for the rest of Texas' season, this win against UTEP? But it's Big 12 title or bust this year, it almost feels like, for a lot of Texas fans. Do you agree with that consensus that in this year, especially with only one non-conference game, is this Big 12 title or bust? Jake, we'll start with you.
It depends how you define bust, because if they don't win the Big 12 title, there's no doubt that this year is going to be considered a disappointment for the Texas football team. However, I don't think that a lack of a Big 12 championship should mean the end of the Tom Herman era at Texas. I think it's far from it. I think Tom Herman has earned a little bit of leeway with the kind of recruiting that he's been doing over the offseason. And as long as this team, I think, is relevant until the end of the year, as long as they have a shot to even get into that Big 12 championship on the last weekend of the year, I think he keeps his job safely for another year.
Henry, what do you think?
No, I don't think it's a Big 12 title or bust for Herman this season. Listen, because Texas, we could see, what if Texas goes, how many games are they playing? Sorry, 10 for the season?
They have 10 total, yes.
So what if they go 9-1 and then lose to someone like an Oklahoma or someone in the Big 12 title game? To me, that's still a great season. Obviously, it didn't close out the way you wanted to, but I think fans, they'll be sour grapes after that loss. But if you have a 9-1 season and you make it to the Big 12 title game and you just don't close that out, I don't think fans are going to be too upset about that. Especially, people are prisoner of the moment, right? So 2 seasons ago, Texas lost in the Big 12 game. Last season, they got off to a good start, and they kind of just completely fell off. So I think if Tom Herman can get back to what they were a couple of years ago, maybe even a little bit better, and still not win the Big 12 title game, I still think fans are going to be okay with that. You seem like you disagree, Jake.
Yeah, well, a couple of years ago, they were a 4-loss football team. So I think a season like that might be the end of the Tom Herman era, whereas a season like the 9-1 you talked about, yeah, I would agree with you.
Right. I was kind of talking. Yeah, that's why I added like a little bit better than 2 seasons ago, but still not winning the Big 12 title.
Yeah.
Do you think that
back.
if they don't make it, if the Longhorns do not make it to the Big 12 championship, that would not be a bust? Especially with Ohio State, seemingly the team that might have been third besides Oklahoma State, losing by 17 to Louisiana at home. Do you think that Texas really has any leniency to not make the Big 12 championship against Oklahoma?
Yeah, I think in that case it wouldn't look very good. I think this team should at least make the Big 12 title game. And if they don't make the Big 12 title game, then there's going to be different conversations about should Tom Herman stay or not. But so I think they have to make the title game. I don't think necessarily have to win it, though, because in order to win it, you have to be the best team in the conference. That's a hard thing to do.
Jake, would you agree with that sentiment? They have to make it to the Big 12 title?
I'm going to stick with what I said before. They have to be in the running for it on the last day of the season. And it matters how they're in the running for it as well. To be honest, teams like Iowa State, Kansas State, Texas Tech, teams on the Texas schedule have not looked good through 1 week of the season. And if Texas is going to, lose to any of those teams, it's going to be a different story. But I think Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are going to be very formidable this year, and so that's going to play into the circumstances down the line.
I agree with you. I think Week 10 they need to be looking to have a chance in the Big 12 title game. Well, that was a lot of Texas football. Now we're going to go into the locker room. It'll be the, of course, virtual locker room coming up. But we're going to be talking about the Clippers blowing a 3-1 lead. We're going to be talking about all NBA snubs. And we're talking ultimately which NBA team do y'all think has the best chance to win the NBA Finals. You're watching the 1-0 Sports Show. Stick around. This is the 1-0 Sports Locker Room. Welcome into the 1-0 Sports Locker Room. Robert Trevino here again. Pleased to be here with Henry and Jake. We're going to embrace debate. And the cool thing about pre-recording this on a Thursday night before Friday is we can get you some real game results from the night before and talk about them live with our reactions. As we just saw together, Miami going up 2-0 6-0 over the Boston Celtics with a very important win. Let's get a quick question from both of you guys. Who do you see winning this series and heading into the finals? And do you think that this Game 2 win shows that Jimmy Butler is massively underrated? Henry, let's start with you.
Boy, this Heat team is full of dogs. And I think that, I mean, for them to come back, for them to outscore the Celtics 37-17 in the third quarter, come back and take – they're fearless, man. So, I mean, right now, I don't know how you can't pick the Heat to win this series right now. I'm not saying it's over because this Celtics team, top to bottom, you could argue is a little more talented than the Heat team. So I won't say it's over. I will pick the Heat to win. And is Jimmy Butler underrated? I think Jimmy Butler is a great guy to have, especially in the playoffs. I'd want him on my team. I don't think he just quite has enough talent to be the number one option on a championship winning team. I think he could definitely be number 2. But I don't think he can be your number 1 in championship winning team.
Jake, how do you respond?
I'm going to go ahead and agree with you that the Miami Heat are the better team in this series. I think Boston has the talent on paper to match up with them defensively, but it's just not coming to fruition. The Heat are hitting big shots and making big stops. I think this series will be over in 5 or 6 games. I don't think the Heat are going to have too much trouble getting to the NBA Finals. But on the Jimmy Butler point, I think this bubble has proved that he is massively underrated, and I think he is capable of being that number 1 guy for a team, but maybe not in the way that LeBron James is the number 1 guy. More of Jimmy Butler can be your 1A, and you have somebody else as a 1B type of situation.
Well,
yes. So you're saying Jimmy Bucket's more of a Chauncey Billups type character?
A little bit, but he brings so much more to a team, I think, than Chauncey Billups did. I mean, he's proven that, he is a very valuable team leader, and he can both, he doesn't take up too many shots. He takes high percentage shots, and the way he contributes on the defensive end of the floor is almost unmatched in the league. I would bring up Kawhi Leonard, but he's not even in the playoffs anymore.
Well, it's the point of this locker room to, quote, embrace debate. So we're going to embrace debate. I can see that you're clamoring to answer that, Henry.
Well, I need to clarify something with you, Jake. When you say 1A for Jimmy Butler, you're saying, like, bottom line, he can be the best player on the championship winning team. Is that what you're saying?
I think he can be the co-best player on a championship winning team. That's what I'm saying. He can be an equal part of being the best player. So, no, I don't think he can be a standalone best player. But if he has somebody right there that's just as good as him, I think that he can be the number 1 guy.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but can you just throw out an example of someone?
I mean, I don't want to bring up the way he played in the bubble, but somebody like Paul George, or maybe a big man like Nikola Jokic. Not that he's going to be on the move anytime soon. I'm just talking about guys that mean a similar amount to their ball clubs and are playing at a high level that Jimmy Butler is right now.
We could see Goran Dragic maybe fill in a 1B type role. But we'll see that. Let's get back to the other series that just concluded, those Denver Nuggets that you mentioned. Coming back from a 3-1 deficit on the LA Clippers, which anytime you bring up 3-1 brings shades of the Warriors' infamous 3-1 loss to the Cavaliers back in 2016 after they came back 3-1 over the Thunder in that same year. So which is the bigger choke job? Let's compare L's here. Which is the worst loss? Would you say the Clippers, with all the expectations, with the signings, with the trades, all that they gave up to get Kawhi and PG, just to lose in the second round? Or was it the Warriors with that awesome block that LeBron had in Game 7? Which one's more embarrassing? Jake, let's start with you this time.
This is an extremely easy question. And the answer is that the Clippers' choke job is much worse. Forget the fact that it's only the second round of the playoffs. You didn't even make it to the conference finals. But to say that the Warriors pulled the bigger choke job is to disrespect that Cavs team. And no disrespect to the Nuggets, that Cavs team is head and shoulders above this Nuggets team. They had LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Love. Now, Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, they're doing incredible things. I'm not going to deny that. But that Clippers team, I mean, that series should have been over so many times. But the Clippers were outscored 64 points over 3 games. That's how many points the Clippers were outscored by in the second half. They choked in each individual game of the second round series. Not acceptable.
And you make some good and very strong points, Mr. Herman. Henry, What do you say?
Jake Herman, I will give you this. I will say that anytime a team loses to LeBron James, it's hard to say they choked because LeBron James, for any playoff series he's been in my opinion, is the best player on the floor. So if your team doesn't have the best player on the floor and you lose, it's hard to say it's a choke job. The Warriors were a bigger choke job, and the reason is because of all that was on the line for the Golden State Warriors. They won 73 games in the season. All the talk, all the season. First of all, throughout the season, they were just toying with teams. They were celebrating across the entire court. Steph Curry, unanimous MVP. They're talking about how they're better than the Chicago Bulls. 73 wins, up 3-1, chance to go down as probably the greatest team in NBA history. I mean, on paper, they would be. I mean, 73 wins in the title. It's really hard to argue against that. And they blow the 3-1 lead. And in Game 7 on their home court, a home court that they were so dominant in the regular season, it took them until about February to lose a home game. They scored 13 points in Game 7. That was their lowest for the entire season of a fourth quarter. And it came in fourth quarter of Game 7 of the NBA Finals. So combined with what happened in that fourth quarter and all that was on the line, also going to be back-to-back champions. Forgot to add that. That's a bigger choke job.
So, to me, the Clippers share a lot of those parallels. They were load managing all season just to prepare for not even this series against the Nuggets, for the next series that they were going to have to play against the Los Angeles Lakers, that they were virtually guaranteed to be a part of. And going back to the Warriors a little bit, Henry, I don't necessarily think it's a choke. I think Game 7 and Game 5 are masterpieces by LeBron James' Cleveland Cavaliers, by Pete Kyrie Irving and the Cleveland Cavaliers, a team that won the Eastern Conference and deserved every bit as much of a chance at the NBA Finals at that Warriors team, no matter how many games that the Warriors won. Don't forget that Draymond Green was suspended for Game 5. Don't forget that Steph Curry fouled out on some dubious calls in Game 6. The Warriors, quote-unquote, choke, as you say, it was kind of out of their hands. I say the Clippers' choke was completely in their hands, as in they had a fully healthy roster. They even got Pat Bev back after losing him in the first round. They had double-digit leads going into halftime, in some cases even the fourth quarter, and then they just quit. Their shooting was anemic. There's no explanation for it, whereas the Warriors have a million reasons why they could have lost.
Okay, a couple of points on that, since you seem to say this is out of their hands. Draymond Green getting suspended. Listen, mental toughness is part of the game. If you're so mentally weak that you can't control your emotions and you get suspended because you hit LeBron in the groin, that's on you. That's not an excuse. Mental toughness is part of the game. Control your emotions. All right, that's number one. Number two, Steph Curry fouling out in Game 6. Steph Curry fouled out with about 3 minutes left. The Cavs were already up by double digits. Game was out of hand, okay? Number three, go look at Steph Curry's numbers, especially for Game 7. Listen, I love Steph Curry, okay? He went, I think he shot 4 of 14 from 3. A guy that's supposed to be able to make shots from the parking lot. He was wide open threes, just bricks, coming off screens, no one around him. Complete bricks, off the dribble, hitting nothing but the backboard. I mean, if he's hitting those shots and they're going in and out, then, just an unlucky night. But the way he was missing them showed that he wasn't shooting them exactly the way he was. He was a little tight. And I hate to say Steph Curry choked because I love him so much. But, I mean, that was bad. I know Paul George hit the side of the backboard too, so I'll give you that.
Okay, well, we got a lot of backboards. We're really embracing debate. Let's get to the next question where I'm sure we'll be debating once again. So I'll give you a recap of the NBA playoffs. I'm sure you know it. I'll give the viewer if they don't. So the Los Angeles Lakers facing the Denver Nuggets. That game will be today, Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals, and the aforementioned series between the Heat and the Celtics, with the Heat up 2-0. With that, gentlemen, which team remaining in the NBA playoffs has the best chance to win it all? Henry, let's start with you.
There's no excuse for the Los Angeles Lakers to not win the NBA title. They have the 2 best remaining players in the bubble, okay? Or left in the playoffs. They have the 2 best players remaining. They have best player in the league, LeBron James, in my opinion, Anthony Davis, obviously. So I think that they by far have the best chance to win the title. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be a complete cakewalk, because I think this Denver Nuggets team, if you look at them, look at their emotion, they wholeheartedly believe that they can win the NBA title. I guarantee it. They truly believe they can win the NBA title. And with the way the Miami Heat are playing, obviously if they get to the finals, LeBron and the Lakers aren't just going to cakewalk through the Heat. So I'm not saying it will be easy, But it's funny. I was listening to a podcast before this. If the LeBron's Lakers don't win this title, this might be the biggest stain on his legacy, including the loss to the Mavericks, because of how favored they are at this point to win the championship.
Wow, that is a steaming hot take in the locker room, saying that this would be LeBron's greatest choke after he somehow lost to Dirk Nowitzki and some other guys. So, Jake, what say you about that?
Yeah, I'm gonna add some fire into the flames of that hot take. I know we embraced a lot of debate on the last question, but on this point, I agree with Henry. This is the Lakers' title to lose. I'm not going to so much go out and say that it's going to be a huge stain on LeBron James' legacy if he's not able to win the title this season in particular. But I think it's the Lakers' season to lose based on the way that their role players have stepped up and the way that they should be able to really dominate the Denver Nuggets in the paint. I think as much as the Nuggets believe in themselves and as much as they're on sort of a magical run right now, it's just a horrible matchup for them. I think the Lakers will find it pretty easy to get to the NBA Finals, and I think it's theirs to lose.
All right, so while I got you both here, I want to put you both on the record just real quick. Who do each of you have meeting the Lakers in the finals should they make it, Miami or Boston? Henry?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I can bet against Miami at this point. Like I said before, I mean, Boston, like I could see them making this a series, but I just don't know how you can bet against Miami right now. The way they're playing, the way their role players are stepping up. Tyler Hero's the man. Love Tyler Hero. I don't know how you can bet against Miami, so I'd say Miami.
Jake, how about you?
It's Miami. There's no way with the way that they've played in the bubble, the way that they're able to adjust mid-game, as we saw tonight when they came back from a double-digit halftime deficit. There's no way Miami will blow this 2-0 lead. I've got them making it to the finals.
All right, so with the end of the NBA season also brings the NBA awards along with the most coveted All-NBA team. So we've seen some great guys like Luka Doncic make the All-NBA first team in only his second year. LeBron didn't even do that. LeBron needed 3 years to make his first All-NBA first team. But let's talk about some of the guys maybe down below who were snubbed a little bit. So I'm going to open the question and say, who was kind of the biggest All-NBA snub? Jake, we'll start with you.
I'll give an honorable mention to Jamal Murray, but the biggest snub from the All-NBA team, a snub of historic proportions, guys, is Bradley Beal. I mean, the disrespect. The first player to ever average 30 points and 6 assists per game does not make the All-NBA team. Now, I understand that the league is, more talented than ever. There's more contention than ever for these 15 spots. However, I just don't understand some of these guys making a team over him. Pascal Siakam, to me, is a complete pick based on last season. And Russell Westbrook, to me, did not mean more to his team and play a better season than Bradley Beal. This is a miscarriage of justice. Bradley Beal should have at least been on the third team. Come on now.
Henry, who's your biggest snub?
Jake, you bring up some good points. And, okay, maybe Bradley Beal was a snub. But in general, I kind of hate this time of the year when these teams come out. People talk about all these snubs, and people say this person got snubbed, that person got snubbed. That okay, if you're gonna say they're snubbed, you got to give me someone who you're gonna take off the team. And I know you just did, Jake, but I don't think it's so clear cut. Obviously, if I had to take a couple people off and put Bradley Beal in, there's only one person I would maybe take off, and that'd be Russell Westbrook. And I'm a big I critique Russell Westbrook a lot, but I still think he's good enough to make the third team All-NBA. So, in my opinion, I don't really think anyone was snubbed. Bradley Beal's Washington Wizards, he couldn't even get to the playoffs. I know it's hard. He didn't have much help around him. But, I mean, that has to play a lead role. Pascal Siakam led his team. Maybe he has a better supporting cast. You could argue that. But he was able to lead his team to the playoffs. So, I understand maybe I like your Bradley Beal pick, but the idea that it's so blasphemous that Bradley Beal did not make the All-NBA team, I don't agree with, because you got to take someone off, and a lot of these guys deserve to be on.
Yeah, so Henry, I like your approach to the question, just basically going against the whole concept of snubs. Jake, I saw you were trying to respond. What are you trying to say?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I totally get it that, it's tough to call somebody a snub, and it's all very subjective. However, who are we kidding? It's completely blasphemous to put Russell Westbrook on the all NBA third team over Bradley Beal. It is. I mean, the Wizards are a bottom 5 team in the NBA without Bradley Beal. They don't get into the bubble without Bradley Beal. To say that he had a worse supporting cast than Pascal Siakam on the Raptors, well, that's the understatement of the century. I mean, he has nothing to work with right now on that Wizards team besides spot-up shooters around him he can kick it out to. That's about it. He gets no help on the defensive end of the floor. And without John Wall, he didn't really have a great passer to set him up. And so, to me, Bradley – and then Russell Westbrook, it can be argued that the Houston Rockets would have been better off without him in the postseason. He was a detriment to their team at times with his horrible shot selection. Beal, you can never say the same about him at any point in the last really couple of seasons.
Well, that could be because the Wizards are not famously in the playoffs.
Yeah. I was going to say one thing real quick. I know we have to go. What I will give you this, Jake. If you poll every GM in the league, guarantee you all of them would rather have Bradley Beal than Russell Westbrook on their team right now.
Agreed. I think we all agree on that one. So let's keep the embrace debate going for one more question. This time we'll move away from the NBA into the NFL. So week 1 brought a lot of things we wanted to see. We got to see Tom Brady play. We got to see the Cowboys come back, see how the Rams responded after losing Super Bowl 54. But it also is time to completely overreact to things. So I'll go to each one of you and say, what are some overreactions that you have based on what you saw on week 1? Henry?
My overreaction is going to be the Cleveland Browns are on the verge of imploding. They did – listen, I understand week 1 they were going up against the Ravens and reigning MVP Lamar Jackson. I get it. But they did not even put up a fight. This is a team with a lot of personalities. Baker Mayfield, OBJ, the list goes on and on. And if they have a performance like they did in week 1 and week 2, and they start off the season 0-2 with the expectations for this team internally, I think they have a lot of high expectations. I think this team has the potential to just completely implode.
Jake, what are you overreacting to after week 1?
Yeah, I'm overreacting to a couple of things, a couple of results that surprised me. The first being the Arizona Cardinals knocking off the San Francisco 49ers. I think that this Cardinals team really has a shot of winning the NFC West. That's an overreaction that I can form based on that first game. They really look strong on both sides of the ball. The second one is that the Philadelphia Eagles are in a little bit of trouble. People were sort of downplaying the significance that 2 or 3 offensive line injuries would have. And they gave up 8 sacks against the Washington football team on Sunday. Now there's all sorts of questions coming up about whether this team is able to protect Carson Wentz, who's already a little bit short of weapons.
Well, I'm glad you got to work in the mention of the Washington football team in there. I wanted to hear that too. Thank you for embracing debate with me, guys, in the 1-0 Sports Locker Room. When we come back, we're talking about what's trending, and the guys are going to give you their picks for who they think will be in this year's college football playoff. Stick around. We'll be right back. Good morning to you, fans. Welcome back to the 1-0 Sports Show. It's your host, Robert Trevino, here with Henry and Jake. And now we're going to be talking about what's trending on this week in sports. The Trailblazers having a kick at the Nuggets, coming back and beating the Clippers. So the Clippers infamously were trash talking a lot of other teams this year, kind of going at the Lakers a little bit subliminally, especially like guys like Patrick Beverley and Lou Williams. What do y'all guys think about the Trailblazers having a little bit of fun at the Clippers' expense? Jake?
I like it. I mean, look, there's not that many things to do in the bubble, and now the Blazers are outside the bubble. They get a chance to clear their heads. They're on the outside looking in, and they come in fully armed with a new set of chirps. I love it from the Blazers. That rivalry, I think, is only going to grow.
Henry, what do you think about this trash talk?
Listen, if you're going to talk that talk, you got to be able to back it up. And if you can't back it up, I mean, when someone comes at you, you just got to be able to take it. I mean, Pat Bev, Marcus Morris, Lou Williams on the sideline laughing, mocking Dame time when Damian Lillard missed some free throws. I mean, if you're going to do that and then blow a 3-1 lead, I mean, come on, like, they could have roasted you even worse. So like, just be happy with what you got and just swallow it and move on.
That's true. This is no longer embrace debate. We all agree on this one. Let's get to a kicker who had some really difficult times this last week. Week 1, Stephen Gostkowski couldn't seem to put it through the big old yellow things they put out there for you to kick it through. So 1 for 5, and then he missed an extra point. Let's read some tweets that were written about him. They said Gostkowski is a system kicker. He actually started the game 5th most accurate in NFL history. By the end of it, he was the 9th most accurate in NFL history. That's a bad night. And no more jokes. Someone said Gostkowski is in a bad place right now, although he did make the one that mattered, hitting the big game winner to beat the Denver Broncos. So how do you guys feel about Gostkowski, I guess, having as good of a bad night as you can have? Henry?
I think he might need some lessons from our guy Dicker the kicker. I mean, this was really, really bad. I think that Gostkowski is a system kicker quote is hilarious. Like you said, he did make the one that mattered. I think that you're just gonna have to go into next week to see if this is really a problem. I mean, some of the greats, because guys has had a great career, and some of the greats have had some really awful games. Maybe this is Gostkowski's one awful game that he's going to be telling the grandkids about, how he just could not get the ball through the uprights. So I guess we'll just have to see until next week. But I don't think it's too much of a cause for concern unless it continues to grow.
Yeah, did someone say Adam Vinatieri? Jake, is this cause to put him on the hot seat potentially?
Yeah, I think it is. I think the seat is certainly getting warm. I think the seat will have already set him ablaze had he not come back to make that game-winning kick. And you know, it's one of those things that really enlightens you on the pressure that an NFL kicker can face, because any given night you could have it and then you just can't. It's the margins of error are so thin, as your stat has really showed us. Even for a guy that's had as accomplished career as Gostkowski, you don't want to make the excuse that he had no preseason reps to get accustomed to. But yeah, I think if he has one more bad night, he's out.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. So we were talking, I don't think any of his field goals got blocked, but let's talk about some blocks and let's debate which one is better. So first,
working against Butler, got downhill.
Here's Bam Adebayo.
Bam says, "Get it out of here!"
Huge game, one block that he had. I'll tell you what, when I saw this block, I was completely dumbfounded.
So Tatum is clearly by everybody else.
But then we go to Kawhi Leonard, who had another great block against the Denver Nuggets. Of course, that series didn't end so well for him.
It's like he got a baseball
glove on. To you guys, which one do you think is the better block? Let's start with you, Henry.
Yeah, I'm going to say that the Bam Adebayo block is better for a couple of reasons. One, I mean, it's just hard for me to say that the Clippers win anything of what's better right now. But if you look at just the block specifically, obviously maybe the Kawhi block physically was a little more impressive. He just did it with the middle finger, obviously. But I think the Bam Adebayo block, I'm going to say, is more impressive just because of the time in the game. I mean, if he hits that dunk, they're tied. They're going to overtime or a second overtime. I couldn't remember if they went overtime or not. So I think that block, step over to get that block clean and not foul under all the pressure in that moment, that's impressive.
So it's clutch factor for you. Jake, which one? Yeah. Which one for you and why?
Yeah, I'll give it to Bam, not just for the clutch factor, but for just the shock and awe factor, really. You see Kawhi's block, you say, wow, how could his finger have possibly withstood that? Like, how I wish that I had the strength of the claw to reject the ball at will with just, the scratch of one finger. But when you watch Bam's block in slow motion, it's a miracle his whole hand didn't go crashing into the rim. I mean, we're talking about the difference between a game-winning block and a potentially series-affecting injury. And so the fact that Bam not only made the play but came out unscathed, it's superhuman.
It really is. I'll agree with you there. So no embracing debate in this time. But, let's get some debate going in this next one, college football playoff picks. So we'll go Henry first and then Jake, and you'll list your 4 teams that you see making this year's college football playoff.
Oh, boy. All right. So number 1, I'm going to give it to Alabama. Number 2, I got Clemson. Number 3, I think this team is now coming. They did not make the playoff last year. Got a chip on their shoulder. I'm going to put Georgia number 3. And then number 4, I am going to now put Ohio State, given that the Big Ten will now play a season.
Yeah, so we have a lot of new teams coming in here. Jake, does this affect who you think was going to make the final 2 spots? And who do you have ranked specifically?
Yeah, it does affect it. I have Clemson ranked first, Alabama second, Ohio State third. Now, I feel like those 3 teams can sort of end up in any order, but I put those teams in those seeds because my number 4 team is Florida. And so putting the teams in that ranking makes matchups that are a bit more realistic. It doesn't match up the 2 SEC teams in the first round because I do think 2 SEC teams are going to make it. I just disagree with Henry over which SEC team is that second team in.
Yeah, so Henry, why Georgia over Florida? And then we'll go to Jake and ask him the same.
I think it's kind of going to come down to just experience. This Georgia team obviously wasn't in last year, but it's been in a little more recently than Florida has. I think, getting bounced or not making the playoff last year has put a big chip on their shoulder. I really like Florida, definitely. I just think that it's going to be close, and I'm going to give that slight edge to Georgia.
Jake, why do you have the Gators coming out of the East?
I think I think they're hungry. And I agree with what you're saying, Henry, about Georgia having experience as a program and both Kirby Smart as a coach. They do certainly have the experience to get there. But I just don't know if Georgia has that much experience on the offensive side of the ball. And that's going to get tested really early in the season. They play Auburn in week 2, Alabama in week 4. And I don't know if this very new offense is going to be ready for Georgia to come up with victories in both of those 2 contests. Florida, on the other hand, they dodge Alabama in the regular season schedule, meaning that I think they can enter the SEC championship game with either 0 or 1 losses behind the play of Kyle Trask, probably the best returning quarterback in the SEC. And I think Florida can sneak their way into the playoff. All they have to do is upset Alabama and LSU.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see how that shakes out in the upcoming weeks. We'll see what teams are playing and how the games shake out. But when we come back, it's about that time, ladies and gentlemen. The predictions, the spread picks, the pick'ems, NBA, NFL, college football. We got it all for you right here. This is the One and No Sports Show. For the last time this morning, welcome back to the One and No Sports Show. I'm your host, Robert Trevino, Henry, and Jake. We're all going to be doing some big pick'ems. This is the ultimate part of the show, so let's jump right in. Number 1, the Lakers are going to open the series against the Denver Nuggets, Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals. Lakers favored by 7 points. Henry, who do you got?
I actually have Denver winning Game 1 because LeBron's teams, especially in the NBA Finals, because this is the NBA Finals, but the Lakers have not won a Game 1 so far in this playoff. I think the Nuggets are going to be riding high. They're going to be more in rhythm. So I think that they have a few days of rest now as opposed to just a couple in their first series against the Clippers. So I'm going to pick the Nuggets to win Game 1, but I think the Lakers will eventually turn around and win the series.
All right, good pick. Jake?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and disagree. I like the Lakers to both win and cover in this Game 1. They've been flat out embarrassed in their last couple of Game 1s in this postseason. I don't think that LeBron James and Anthony Davis will let that happen again. Nuggets were poor in Game 1 against the Clippers when they had a rest disadvantage, and they have the rest disadvantage in this game.
Yeah, Henry, I'm sorry I told you good pick, but I'm going to have to agree with Jake here. I have the Lakers. I think LeBron, they have a lot of rest, and LeBron's not going to let this hot Nuggets team get the best of the Lakers and set the tone. I think he really needs to win Game 1, which I guess every team wants to win Game 1, but with LeBron, it's a little bit different. All right, let's head into some college football. Oklahoma State ranked 11th in the country. A lot of people see them as one of the challengers to Oklahoma in the Big 12 alongside Texas. They're taking on Tulsa at home. They're 22.5-point favorites. Probably no disagreement as to who's going to win this one. But who do you think covers the spread, Jake?
Yeah, I think Oklahoma State eventually gets somewhat comfortable in this football game. But I'm going to go with Tulsa to cover the spread. They're a team that ended last year pretty well. And based on the way that the Big 12 teams have looked in the first couple of non-conference showdowns, with the exception of Texas and Oklahoma, it's been a little bit harrowing at times. We already saw a couple of Sun Belt teams knock off Big 12 teams. Again, I don't think that happens here, but I think Tulsa covers the spread.
You know what? I'm going to have to disagree with you. I think Oklahoma State, I don't think this is that team that lost to Central Michigan those years ago. I think Oklahoma State is going to cover this week. I think they're really a legitimate challenge to not only Oklahoma, but also to Texas to get to that Big 12 championship game. Henry, who do you got?
Yeah, I agree with you, Robert. I think Oklahoma State is going to cover. First game of the year, obviously a lot of talent on this team. Tulsa is only able to let Texas not cover. That is what their specialty is. But Oklahoma State is not Texas, so Oklahoma State will cover.
All right, sticking now into Texas football, Baylor taking on Houston. Baylor 4-point favorites here. This is a big Texas football toss-up. Henry, who do you got?
I have Baylor winning and covering. Baylor, they have their senior Charlie Brewer in that quarterback this year, so obviously he has some experience under his belt, and I like Baylor to cover in this one.
Jake, how about you?
Yeah, this game's a total toss-up. I agree. I've got faith in Dave Aranda, though, in that Baylor team to get the W in this one. I just don't trust Houston's defense.
Not so fast, my friends. I think Houston in this one. This is kind of one of those gut picks. I went 2-7 last week. Did not do well in my picks. So I got to rebound this one, maybe try to bring it back a little bit. But I also like Houston. I know you said Charlie Brewer, but I think that the Cougars are just going to have too much in this one. All right, let's move on. Tulane taking on Navy. Tulane, 7-point favorites in this one. Who do you got in this one? Jake, let's start with you.
Oh, Navy. They need to bounce back after that embarrassment against BYU. And I think they will bounce back enough to cover the spread in this ball game. Tulane is a team that will try and run the ball against Navy, but I think that this proven Navy system, even though they have so many new players, the proven system has to bounce back, and they're going to play better in this football game than they did against BYU.
Well, I'll tell you this, Jake, so fast, because I'm also taking a flyer on the midshipmen. I think they just got what it takes. I think they do bounce back. I think they're able to take care of Tulane. Henry, do you agree or disagree?
Not so fast. Grab the remote for this one. This is a big not so fast. I am taking Tulane here to cover. Tulane's coming off a good win in week 1. They're riding high right now. I don't think they want to get embarrassed, even though a 7-point swing isn't particularly that big. But I like Tulane.
Since when has a wave ever wiped out a Navy? That's what I ask you.
Nice play. Nice play. We'll see if you can keep up the weird play coming up with the next games. All right, Notre Dame, number 7, up against USF. Kind of, once again, a lot of agreement. We could see Notre Dame winning this one. 26-point favorites. Henry, let's start with you. Who do you got covering?
Yeah, I'm going to take USF to cover in this one. Just like Tulane, they feel good after a week 1 win. I don't think they're going to get blown out. I think it's kind of a pride thing for them. So taking USF.
I'm gonna disagree on this one. I think Notre Dame has looked really good. I like Book. A lot of leadership on this team, especially in this year where they need it, and having to already getting to play with the ACC. This is a real big opportunity for them. I see them covering the spread. Jake, how about you?
Yeah, Robert, with picks like these, your luck is going to turn. I'm going with the luck of the Irish to cover the spread. I think they knocked the rust off against a pretty decent Duke team last week. I think they'll win convincingly in this ballgame.
All right, let's stick with the better team from Florida that's not in the Power 5 conferences, UCF, defending national champions, or I think from 2018, whatever. I think they give it to themselves every year. Number 14 this year, taking on Georgia Tech, who's coming off a big win in Florida State's Tallahassee Stadium. Didn't have the stadium name on memory, but you understand it. So UCF 7.5-point favorites. Henry, who do you have in this one?
So I know this goes completely against what I've been saying before, but regardless of Georgia Tech coming off a big win, I'm taking UCF to cover the spread here. Obviously, they got a pretty good team back. They're ranked number 14 this year, and I think 7.5 is actually kind of maybe a little bit disrespectful to UCF because I think they could really cover this by a lot. So I'm taking UCF.
Yeah, I would typically agree with you saying that this is kind of recency bias, but there's just something about Georgia Tech's revamped offense, and I should have picked them last week. I changed it at the last minute. That was cowardice, utter cowardice, and I won't do it again. I'm taking Georgia Tech on this one, even though, in my heart of hearts, I feel like it's going to be kind of like that betters kind of thing where now they're not going to win. Jake, how do you fall on this one?
Yeah, it's important to remember that Florida State team that Georgia Tech beat, yes, it's a road win, but no, there aren't fans. And yes, it's Florida State, a renowned program, but no, they haven't been good in about 5 years. I'm going UCF to cover the spread in this football game. I don't really buy into Georgia Tech just yet.
All right, let's go back into some Texas football, a little bit more low-key. UTEP, who we just saw score 3 points at DKR, going to play Abilene Christian University. Probably not a lot that we know a lot in depth about these guys, but who do you got with UTEP as a 4.5-point favorite? Henry, we'll start with you.
I got Abilene Christian right here. Do not sleep on them. Listen, I heard their coach speak in a video. Their coach, they're pumped up. They're ready to go. And obviously, UTEP did not look particularly good last week. Obviously, the competition was a little bit greater, than them. But I like Abilene Christian here. Don't sleep on them.
I think saying that UT is a little bit harder competition than Abilene Christian is a pretty big understatement. I think the fact that this spread is so close just makes it UTEP for me. I think if it was maybe a 14-point spread, Abilene Christian is no joke. But I think UTEP is capable of winning this game by at least a possession. Jake, what do you think?
I'm with you. Picks up. Wait, there we go. Picks up, Robert. I'm going UTEP in this football game. They've had experience playing a team of Abilene Christian's quality and Stephen F. Austin. They beat them by 10. I'm going with UTEP here. They just survived a tough test in Texas. It's all downhill from here.
Okay, here's a top 25 matchup. These feel kind of rare, especially with a lot of the top 25 teams not playing thus far in the season. Number 18, Louisville against number 17, Miami. Louisville is the 2.5-point favorite. Jake, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm going with the Louisville Cardinals in this one. I really like their quarterback, Malik Cunningham, and I think that they're going to be able to outscore Miami in a game that will feature a lot of points, guys.
I do agree with you that it will be a high-flying, high-scoring game. However, we've been agreeing a little too much, all right? I'm taking the U in this one. I think Miami has the tools. They're coming back. This is going to be their season to make a deep run. They're not going to challenge Clemson, but I think they'll have a pretty good season. Henry?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you, Robert. Obviously, this game is going to be very close, but I'm going to agree. Miami, I think they brought some guys back that could really make a difference given the experience they have had last year. And so I'm taking Miami.
Well, the U's have it. I hope you like that one, Jake. But we'll move on. The U's have it on this one. And now we're going to switch into the NFL. Ravens at the Texans. The Ravens 7-point favorites in this one. How do y'all see this one shaping out? Henry?
I like the Texans in this one. I think not only do I think they're going to cover, but I think they're going to shock the world. I think they're going to win the game. Obviously, they did not perform last week against Kansas City the way they wanted to. So I think they're coming out with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. They know they got to get it right. And listen, lots happened this year in 2020 that people have not expected. And I think this is going to turn the football world upside down where the Texans win.
Jake, how are you feeling on this one?
Yeah, I'm with Henry here. I think that the Texans at 0-1 are a little bit desperate to not fall to 0-2. And, if you're the Texans, you can't really draw much worse of an opening schedule than the defending Super Bowl champions in the Chiefs and the reigning MVP in Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. I think the Ravens win this football game, but Deshaun Watson and the Texans do enough to keep it close and cover that spread.
You know what I would typically say here, but I'm not going to say that catchphrase. I'm going with Lamar Jackson. I don't know how you guys are picking against him. I think that they're going to win this game by more than a possession. The Texans came out. They looked really flat against the Chiefs, and not just because they lost. I think that their offensive, defensive dynamic just kind of wasn't there. And sure, that may be early season rust, but I just don't really have faith in the Texans. Granted, they are probably the favorite in their division alongside the Titans and honestly the Jaguars, basically anybody but the Colts at this point. But I'm going to take a flyer on the Ravens here, and this will bring us into our final pick of the morning. The Seahawks and the Patriots on Sunday Night Football. The Seahawks 3.5-point favorites. Who do y'all got? Jake, we'll start with you.
Yeah, this is one of the season games where everybody starts to question the Patriots down on them. Past couple of seasons, it seems like the Patriots have one of these primetime hiccups. The one that comes to mind for me is the Lions game from a couple of years ago where they got trounced in that dome. I think Seattle is in high gear right now after week one. I like what I saw from them against Atlanta. And I'm going to go with Seattle in this one.
Yeah, you know what? I'm actually going to agree with you there. I think that Seattle is pretty much the team, one of the teams to beat, at least in the NFC. They're looking really good. And that's not to take anything from Bill Belichick and his Patriots. This is more to deal with the Seahawks than it does with the Patriots. But I think the Seahawks pull this one out. And the last pick of the day goes to Henry.
Well, while I'm riding high on this crowd I got behind me, I am going to take – I like the Pats in this one. Listen, I think the Pats look pretty good in week one. Obviously, there's still some things they can work out. But I like the way Cam Newton looked in that offense, and I like the Pats here.
We'll see. That's not a bad pick. Well, that is all the picks we have for you today, and that's all we have for you on this episode of the 1-0 Sports Show. Thank you for joining us. Make sure you tune in next week, and be sure to check out some of our sister shows, College Press Box, Monday nights at 9:30, and College Crossfire. That'll be next Wednesday at 9. For Jake Herman, Henry Core, and all those in Master Control, shout out to Thomas Fitch. I'm Robert Trevino, and have a good morning.